Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. I wanted to make a video to create an update about the Pentad. There's been some Twitter conversation, amongst others, about reimbursements, amongst other things. So, when the original Pentad proposal came out before 1010, as people were coming together and thinking about this, the value of ADA was 83 cents or higher. So at 70 million ADA, that's about $58 million worth of money to work with. The current value of the Pentad proposal at the current price of ADA is about $18 million. The original idea of the Pentad proposal, being a Pentad, is that there was a midnight and a Cardano side, and that we would use the negotiating power and capabilities of the Midnight Foundation to bundle these things and get a better price in aggregate for everything. So there's a Midnight side and a Cardano side. With the current funding level of the Pentad, the cost of the integrations just for Cardano is greater than the value that was given for the integrations, meaning that the Midnight Foundation actually still now has to pay out of pocket for all of its integrations. So it participated in, worked hard, negotiated hard for an end result of getting absolutely no subsidy and funding whatsoever for any of its integrations, which is greater than $10 million. The Midnight Foundation has also been negotiating with Fireblocks, and it's important for people to understand that there's been a collection of types of integrations with Fireblocks. Prior to all of this, I guess there was a relationship between Iagon and Fireblocks, and they were negotiating with Fireblocks independent of the Pentad. They didn't reach out to us and say, hey, we'd like to be part of this Pentad and merge negotiations together. They reached an independent integration fee and then came and said, well, we'd like to be reimbursed, even though it wasn't part of the original governance proposal and we weren't in the Pentad. In a time when there was $58 million of value, it's okay to try to find ways to get some more value to different actors, especially if they contributed to or helped a relationship along. But it's important to understand the negotiations that they were conducting, independent of the Pentad, was for a different type of integration with Fireblocks and the integration that the Midnight Foundation has been pursuing, which is much more intimate and expensive. And I understand that people just want to go to Twitter and the least productive channel and talk about these things. Everyone in the Pentad is at a loss. We did not make a profit, and the vast majority of the integrations will require out-of-pocket expenses from the Cardano Foundation, the Midnight Foundation, input, output, Emergo, and Intersect, and long-term liabilities, because many of these things required multi-year contracts. Iagon is not a signer on any of these integrations and takes none of the liabilities. Their leadership seems to believe that they should still be reimbursed. Prior statements I made were under different facts and circumstances, and I'm trying to set the record straight today. We as an ecosystem have to stop shooting ourselves in the foot and living in an age of endless drama, and when people don't get what they want, to go to Twitter and complain about it. I myself left Twitter, and I mostly run it through third parties and bots these days because I realized I wasn't part of the solution to that culture, and I was contributing to that bad culture. So I took a step back and changed the way that I was doing things. The purpose of the Pentad was a global reset on this concept of delegated executive authority to bring a group of actors together to try to figure out a way to push the ecosystem as a whole together. And that's what we did. 84 days between when we signed the deal with Circle to when we had USDCX installed and activated on Cardano and turned on. And it's already the number one stable coin on Cardano. The number one. 84 days from when it was signed to implemented and put into the system. And there's a deep and detailed integration for layer 0, as there is Pith. We've gotten Dune Analytics, many other things inside the initial Pentad. That is the advantage of coordinating in this way. And it requires a lot of hard work. It requires people to work together. And when people hear things that they don't like, if their attitude is then, well, then let me just burn the whole house down, weaponize my community, and then go to Twitter to complain about it, and then start talking about chain agnosticism to leave Cardano. That's not productive or helpful, and it doesn't show a healthy ecosystem. We have to work together if we want to get out of the mess that we're in. If we want to see the MAUs, TVL, and transaction volume of Cardano increase, and we want to see Cardano's DeFi ecosystem thrive, there has to be some good faith of coordination. And people have to accept that facts and circumstances change. We couldn't predict 1010 and the markets going from 83 cents down to 25 cents. While the markets were good, I was one of the strongest advocates of a sovereign wealth fund for Cardano to divest $100 million worth of ADA and convert it into a stable coin. Had we done that when I advocated as an ecosystem, we would have done it at 80-cent ADA. We could have repurchased all the ADA sold at this current level and still had a huge slush fund of stablecoin liquidity that we could deploy in USDCX and augment and enhance our ecosystem. A variety of things happened that slowed down the decision making for that, but that's an example of when we sometimes get in our own way and we shoot ourselves in the foot. When we look to the future for Pentad V2, there's a long list of Cardano applications on our network right now that absolutely need a strategic investment to get to the next level. And if they don't get that investment, there's not a high probability they're going to survive more than 12 to 24 months. So this is a great buying opportunity for us as an ecosystem. We can create a weighted index of all those things. The Cardano ecosystem can take ownership in its DApp and DeFi layer and make that property of the treasury. And they can use those resources to get listed, to continue building their roadmaps, and to use the commercially critical integrations to be able to connect to other ecosystems, to bring in liquidity and other people. That's what stands in front of us. Here's the problem. There will be winners and losers in that process. And if our attitude as an ecosystem is the people not in an index proposed immediately go and try to burn down the entire house and say everything about Cardano is corrupt and wrong, we're never going to move forward and we're never going to reach a consensus. We have to make difficult decisions at 25-cent ADA and as an ecosystem that has great promise but has failed to deliver on the promises of its DeFi ecosystem. If we're going to make the case to the VCs and external actors that Cardano should be their first choice, they have every right to ask, does Cardano invest in itself? And does Cardano as an ecosystem speak with a unified voice? We did that with the Pentad for the first time in a long time. And in 84 days, we went from signing a deal that took 4 years to make to having it on our network, running on our network. That is the power of unification. And to attack that structure of unification or to say it doesn't honor its commitments when it never even made those commitments. And no, me making a video does not commit to Pentad. I'm not in charge of it. I'm a member of one of 5 voices that has to live with the reality that when it wanted to do it, it went from 58 million to today a value of 18 million. That's the reality. And we have to deal with the fact that there's a $40 million shortfall between when we wanted to do it and where we're at today. Every single member of the Pentad has to accept that shortfall, meaning out of pocket for commitments and obligations, they have to make it up. But apparently we suffer that. External people not connected to that have no obligation or commitment. They should just simply be reimbursed. It's not real. It's not a reasonable demand. And if every single time we try to move forward with this mindset, we get caught up in this drama and miasma, we'll run into the same problem we ran into with the Cardano Sovereign Wealth Fund, where it was a great opportunity. We would have made 3 times our money already and been able to fully reimburse the treasury already and had a bunch of stable coins to play around with. But because we couldn't converge for a variety of reasons, we're here today for that. We have to move with one voice. We have to move with urgency, and we have to accept the fact that there's much we have to do. We can't rely on the infrastructure of Cardano being pristine and awesome to be our competitive differentiator. In any ecosystem, not only do you have infrastructure, you have utility and experiences. And if you don't have great experiences and you don't have great utility, you have useless infrastructure. I'm a big believer in extended UTXO, liquid non-custodial staking, and the fact that Laos has solved the blockchain trilemma. I believe in that. And I think it's a massive competitive differentiator. But that has to be matched with a DApp and DeFi ecosystem that's competitive and matched with experiences that are comparable or greater than the other chains. And if it's not matched with those things, we are not competitive as an ecosystem. The purpose of the Pentad is to try to figure out a path together where we can get these things done using the Cardano treasury and the Cardano ecosystem. But that's a two-way relationship. It can't just be this collection of organizations sitting up in the clouds, mandating down. It's also the Cardano ecosystem engaging and figuring out how to engage and talk with that to figure out what we need as core utilities and what we need as a core experience. And we have to ask ourselves, what advantages does our infrastructure provide to everyone? We have a great infrastructural advantage for Bitcoin DeFi. And we have a program called Pogan that we've been working on for a while to implement that Bitcoin DeFi, led by Omar Hussan. We have a great program with Midnight to add privacy and selective disclosure and much better abstraction primitives for cross-chain transactions, as well as for account abstraction, to make the user experience better for everybody, safer for everybody, and ultimately to bring privacy to the masses. That's a competitive differentiator. And if Cardano embraces these differentiators, we can deliver utilities and experiences to market that Ethereum does not have and Solana does not have, which will be the basis of our growth of TVL, our growth in user base, and our growth in transaction volume. But we have to be willing to embrace that. We have to be willing to work together. Pentad V1 built the roads. We now have highways connecting us to the Circle network. Soon we'll have highways connecting us to the Layer 0 network. We now have Tier 1 oracles integrated in, and we're now recognized by the analytics sites, and an increasingly larger amount of custodians are working with us, as evidenced by the fact that Midnight can now be listed and has been listed on Tier 1 exchanges, the first Cardano native asset. That's awesome. So if millions of users want to come in, they can use those highways. But they have to have a reason to drive on those highways. There has to be something unique, compelling, and differentiating to drive on those highways. And that's what the next iteration is about. But we can't build that iteration if there's relentless and unending dissonance and an attitude of the minute that I can't get what I want, I go and burn the whole house down. It's not an ecosystem worth investing in, and it's not an ecosystem where people are going to want to come to. So it's a decision that people have to make. As we close out the Pentad V1 and get the final things done and the final integrations done, I'm very proud of the other 4 core entities that we worked with. Phil from Emergo and Jack from Intersect and Fred Gagard from the Cardano Foundation and Fahmy Syed from Midnight Foundation. They acted as best they could in incredibly hard situations, and in many cases with negotiations that were fundamentally unfair. We could get there for most of the actors. Some we couldn't because they were just too unreasonable about what they wanted to do. But for the most part, Cardano's now connected to the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem, and we can bear great fruits from that. The next stage is for us as an ecosystem to come together, reset, and be realistic and reasonable. And for the Cardano ecosystem's treasury to take ownership in a weighted index of the Cardano dApps and DeFi layer, so that all of you as ADA holders have a vested interest in the DeFi ecosystem. It's not an either or, it's an and. We're together. And then once we take that investment, we all work together to make that 10x our ecosystem in terms of monthly active users, total lock value, and transaction volume. So the dApp and DeFi ecosystem of Cardano can grow and thrive. And there's strong reasons for people to take those highways from Solana and Ethereum, from Bitcoin and other ecosystems into the Cardano ecosystem. What I do as an infrastructure person at Input Output with our infrastructure partners like Intersect and Pragma and the other node builders is we try to make sure that the infrastructure is ready for all those people to come and visit. Somebody has to make the power and make sure the sewage gets done and make sure those roads can handle the traffic. And that's what Ouroboros Laos is about, which solves the blockchain trilemma. That's what Hydra is about. That's what Paris is about. Make sure that all those things are there. And we have to figure out a way to make that work in a sustainable and decentralized way across everybody in the ecosystem. It's a tremendous challenge. But just because your infrastructure can support it, again, doesn't mean that people are going to utilize it. So the next level up is using that delegated executive function to figure out how we put all these pieces together for everyone everywhere so that we can get this ecosystem to the next level. And I don't think there's any reason we can't do that. Our biggest USP is our governance system. Ethereum doesn't have this. Bitcoin doesn't have this. We can debate, but then once a vote is taken, a vote's taken. And that becomes the official position of the Cardano ecosystem. There's no way to do this with Bitcoin as they tackle quantum resistance and try to figure out how to get that in. There's no way to do this with Ethereum as they tackle an ever increasingly complex roadmap where a single founder is trying to keep it all together with a small group of entities, and no one's ever quite happy with it. But there is a way to do this with Cardano. You spoke last year in the fastest and one of the most unanimous votes we had in the Cardano ecosystem, a super majority, that you wanted these commercially critical integrations. You didn't ask the whole ecosystem to do it. You asked 5 entities to figure it out. And we made it happen to the best of our abilities within the budget allotted. And again, those entities are going to come together now with more people and try to figure out how we create a weighted index of the most valuable utilities and experiences to get the Cardano DeFi ecosystem where it needs to go. It's a complicated question. There's a lot of moving pieces to it, and it's a lot more controversial than it was before because it's not just a pass-fail. There's an implicit endorsement or lack thereof of certain ventures. But it's the only way we're going to be able to get this ecosystem where it needs to go because there's no capital coming in from VC. Just not. And there's not enough investment at the TVL level and transaction volume level, the revenue of the DeFi ecosystem, to self-sustain this to grow in that particular direction. The Treasury has to be engaged as a lender of last resort to create this. But it's not a gift. It's not a bailout. It's not a grant. It's a strategic investment as an ecosystem. Because if we do this and we bet right as an ecosystem, all those things in the weighted index can grow tremendously, creating a huge return, just like the sovereign wealth fund could have done if we acted decisively as an ecosystem. It's a choice we have to make. And it's my opinion, as a member of the ecosystem, we should embrace it. It's not my decision. The power of an on-chain governance system is you, the holder of ADA, ultimately get to decide. And if we decide not to go in that direction, get to propose your own way. And if enough people get on board, it will get done. That is the power of decentralization, and that is the power of decentralized governance, is that we all, to the best of our abilities, get to make the case for where we think we should go and how we should get there. And all that we ask is, after the decision's been made, we disagree and commit if we were on the losing side. That's how we move forward. If we're unable to do that, well, we have every right to complain. We're not being productive. No one wants to be on a boat where half the people on the boat say, well, I never really wanted to go there anyway. And the entire trip they complain. And anytime something bad comes up, they say, see, I told you so. It doesn't solve the problem. Once the ecosystem has made the decision, each and every one of us, whether we agreed with it or not, we have to find a way to work together to see if we can actually achieve the intended goal and outcome. Decisions that are being made to make Cardano grow and thrive. They're not being made in a way that only if you win should you care about Cardano growing and thriving. If you're a member of this community, you have no incentive to cut off your nose to spite your face. If you lose, I've lost many arguments. You say, you know what? Let's push forward. There's no greater example than the fact that I fundamentally disagree with many of the things about the form, structure, and behavior of certain core entities in the ecosystem. And I took my case to the Cardano ecosystem for a year, much to their pain. And despite the fact that for an entire year I complained until I was blue in the face The Cardano ecosystem told me, shut up, get in line, and work with them. That's what you voted for with the Pentad. And I had to set all my disagreements and grievances and frustrations about history in the past, years of it, aside and say, let's completely reset the working relationship and let's find a way to work together. And after we did that, 84 days after signing a deal, we had Circle on the network. That's the power of disagree and commit. And I'm not asking people to do things that I'm not personally willing to do myself or have done myself. But if we want to thrive and grow as an ecosystem, this is the attitude and mentality we must have. And if we want to show to the rest of the cryptocurrency space that we are fundamentally different, we must show them that through how our governance works. Cardano has a massive treasury, and it is the largest DAO by population and voting of any in the entire cryptocurrency space. It's the only one in the top 10 that has a governance system this sophisticated and this capable. It's useless if we don't use it correctly. And part of using it correctly is we have to be decisive on what our goals are. We are exiting the era of infrastructural differentiation. Our competitors do a lot of great stuff. And while we can argue that we're better, no consumer is going to adopt Cardano because the infrastructure of Cardano has some intrinsic superiority over everything else. It's not a primary concern for the retail holder. Where they're going to differentiate is on the experiences and the utilities. What do you do and how do you do it? And for who do you do it for? For whom? That is where the differentiation is going to come. Part of Pentad was to turn on everything so we could start the process of asking that question. And then the next stage is to supercharge the utilities and experiences so we can do it well. If we do that and we speak with one voice, and even if people don't get exactly what they want, they're willing to go along with it to see if we can make it happen. We as one ecosystem can leapfrog all these others and we can grow dramatically. If we're unable to do that, then it's not just a localized problem. It tells us that governance has failed in Cardano. And the great experiment of decentralized governance is not competitive compared to centralized governance, effectively saying that dictators are better than democracy. I don't want to believe that. And I think that the wisdom of the crowds is intrinsically superior. I really do. And I think we've all fought and invested our time, effort, and money for years and years and years to try to get to a point where we have the right to not only run this experiment, but verify it's true, that decentralization is better than centralization. And there's no greater example than what's happening this year in 2026. We don't have an infrastructure problem. Project Blueprint, the node diversity, Laos, all these things, we can build damn good software and we can build damn good protocols. We have a DApp and DeFi, and we have an experience problem. We were an island. We're no longer an island. We built those bridges. That's what you paid for with Pentad. Now we have to have that conversation of utility and experiences for the ecosystem as a whole. And we have to develop a mindset mentality of let's fight like hell for our positions and mindset. But once a decision's been made, let's get it done convincingly, absolutely, and quickly. So the entire rest of the cryptocurrency space can then ask a very fundamental question. Why am I on a chain where either I have to accept a dictator or anarchy and either nothing gets done or eventually the wrong things get done? Why shouldn't I be on a chain where I have a say and they seem to be able to get their shit together and do things quickly and do things well? I should go to Cardano. That makes a lot of sense. That's how we win. And that's how we get back to where we were and go beyond and become the number one cryptocurrency in the planet. And that's how we show the rest of the space how to get it done. I want to do that. And I want to do that with all of you. So I figure I'd make this video because you know what? I'm a fighter. I got nothing to hide. And when people challenge or they attack a process, from time to time, I step up and I say, all right, well, this is my opinion and my position. And this is what I believe in. For 10 years, I've been fighting hard for Cardano. And it's changing from me just fighting to us fighting. We have to stand together and we got to figure out how to get this done. requires me to change approaches, as you saw with Twitter, and change approaches, as you saw with my relationship with other entities in the ecosystem. And I'm absolutely not afraid to call out people when I think that they haven't done things the right way. But at the end of the way, at the end of the day, it's not a destructive thing. It's a necessary thing. We don't have infinite time. We have a lot of resources if we choose to use them, but we have to use them decisively, and we have to use them with great wisdom. And if we do, we as an ecosystem will thrive and become a shining beacon for the rest of the space, especially in a time of cynicism and pessimism. There's not a lot of hope right now in the cryptocurrency space. You may have noticed since 1010, this is the worst sentiment in the history of cryptocurrency since I began over 15 years ago. The worst sentiment. How we get out of it is by being better and being different and giving people a reason to have good sentiment. And that starts with ourselves, our own ventures, how we choose to conduct ourselves, and how we work together. The governance tools we have, they give us tremendous raw capabilities, but they don't solve that problem for us. That still requires people to come together and want this to work. And it's ours to lose. If we do that decisively this year, we will exit the year stronger than we've ever been in the history of the ecosystem. But more importantly, we'll exit the year as the flag bearer, as the vanguard of a new cryptocurrency space. Not one led by cynicism, not one led by pessimism, but one led by optimism and agency, where people believe that we together can get great things done. I honestly believe it's ours to lose, and it's ultimately our decision how we want to get this done. For my part, I'll work with our partners and propose the next generation of the Pentad in the coming months. There's a lot of work under the hood to get that done. And for your part, you have every obligation to debate it, fight it, challenge it, and ultimately a decision has to be made. Is this what we want to do, or is there something else? And if it's something else, then we just got to go do that and get it done, because we can't let Cardano fail. It's not just about us anymore or protocol anymore. In a world of federated bank chains, in a world of regulation where you're a security by default, in a world that's salivating over the prospect of banning non-custodial wallets and self-sovereign identity, if we lose this fight as the vanguard, we don't just lose a cryptocurrency, we lose our freedoms. I firmly believe that. This is a global concern between us and a class of people that are too used to a lack of accountability, transparency, and ultimately the ability to rob us of our dignity. And if you don't believe me, pick up a newspaper. Look at what's going on in the world. Do you honestly feel that the people running the show care about you? You have liberty and you have agency in that. If your answer is no, you have your answer here. We have to do it ourselves. And we have absolutely no right to say that what we have built is better than what has come before if we can't demonstrate it. And this is our chance. We're out of the beta. Cardano's governance is here and we are fully decentralized. It's up to us to demonstrate we can be better than the people we seek to replace. And if we can't do that, we don't deserve to replace them. So let's prove it to them. Let's prove it to the world. But first, let's prove it to ourselves. Thank you all for listening. Cheers.